Manisha Vardaan vanished into the night. Raghav Taneja spun lies of innocence. Sumer Malik's white SUV hid deadly secrets. Divya Rathore whispered truths no one wanted to hear. Aarti Dabas saw what fear made her bury. And Inspector Kunal Bhoria uncovered a conspiracy darker than Bhiwani had ever known. Manisha Vardaan was a young woman of 26 who had grown up in the quiet lanes of Bhiwani, Haryana. Her neighbors described her as graceful and ambitious, with a sharp mind and a heart that wanted more from life than what small towns usually allowed. She had married Raghav Taneja 3 years earlier, in what many considered a well-matched union. Raghav was a private contractor, often seen driving out of town for projects, returning only on weekends or late evenings. To outsiders they seemed like a stable couple, but behind closed doors, Manisha's life carried silent fractures that no one noticed until it was too late. On the evening of August 11th, the town basked in the lingering warmth of a summer day. Manisha, dressed in a simple kurta and sandals, left home for her regular evening walk. She carried her phone, but she didn't answer any calls that evening. Witnesses later said they had seen her walking past the market road, smiling faintly, as if lost in her own thoughts. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Hours passed, and when she failed to return home, Raghav began to worry. By nightfall, he called her friends and family, asking if she had gone to visit them, but no one knew her whereabouts. The town of Bhiwani was small enough for news to travel fast. By morning, whispers spread from shopkeepers to neighbors, from one family courtyard to another. Some said she had run away. Others speculated about an accident, but none of it felt convincing. Posters carrying her photograph were printed and pasted across the city, her sharp eyes and calm smile staring from every wall. The absence of any trace made the community restless. Raghav reported her missing at the local police station, describing the events of the evening with trembling hands. The officers noted down the details, but in their experience, disappearances often revealed secrets no one wanted exposed. Was this an act of voluntary escape, or had something sinister happened in the quiet shadows of Bhiwani? Inspector Kunal Bhoria was given charge of the case. Known for his patience and sharp instincts, he had solved several cases that others thought unsolvable. The moment he looked at Manisha's picture, he felt something unsettling. She didn't seem like the kind of person to leave without a trace. He decided to start with the most obvious step, scrutinizing her marriage. Spouses were almost always the first suspects in cases like these. As the investigation began, the first hours became crucial. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen Manisha after she left for her walk. Several residents recalled spotting her, but none could say where she went afterward. The trail ended abruptly. No shops had CCTV cameras pointing toward the road she usually took. It was as though she had been swallowed by the night itself. Raghav insisted he had nothing to do with it. He told police that their marriage had its usual ups and downs, but nothing serious enough to drive Manisha away. His trembling demeanor made him appear genuine, but Inspector Bhoria knew better than to take emotions at face value. Meanwhile, Manisha's best friend Divya Rathore reached the police station with tears in her eyes, demanding update. She revealed to the officers that Manisha had been acting strangely for weeks. She seemed stressed, often preoccupied, and had hinted about someone troubling her. Divya couldn't provide a name, but her words painted a picture of a woman battling unseen pressure. As the sun set on the second day, the town grew tense. Markets buzzed with gossip. Households whispered of betrayal, and the case slowly gripped everyone's attention. For many, Manisha was no longer just a missing woman. She became a symbol of unanswered questions. How could someone disappear from a busy road in broad daylight without leaving behind even a scrap of evidence? Theories multiplied. Some believed she had been kidnapped. Others feared the involvement of organized criminals. But beneath all the rumors, one truth remained. Manisha was gone, and the silence she left behind was more deafening than anything else. It was this silence that haunted Inspector Bhoria as he prepared to widen his investigation. Somewhere in the quiet corners of Bhiwani, a secret was hiding, waiting to unravel. Inspector Kunal Bhoria began his second day on the case with a fresh set of questions and sharper suspicion. He knew that in missing person cases, the most trusted relationships often hid the darkest truth. His eyes turned naturally toward Raghav Taneja, the husband who claimed to be worried, yet seemed strangely composed. He had made the initial report, spoken of love and concern, but there were cracks in his statement. Sometimes he said he noticed his wife missing at 8 in the evening. Other times he mentioned 9. Such inconsistencies planted doubt in the investigator's mind. The first rule of suspicion was clear. If the story doesn't align, the truth lies hidden beneath. The police decided to quietly observe Raghav's activities. Officers watched his phone records, traced his movements, and spoke discreetly to those who knew him. It turned out that Manisha and Raghav had frequent arguments. Neighbors admitted to hearing raised voices late at night, though none of them had ever stepped forward to intervene. On the surface their marriage looked ordinary, but in the shadows something darker brewed. Divya Rathore, the closest friend of the missing woman, added weight to this suspicion. She told investigators that Manisha had confided in her about feeling suffocated. Though she never used the word fear, Divya recalled moments when her friend's hands trembled while speaking of her future. According to her, Manisha hinted that she was caught in a storm much larger than marital disputes. Inspector Bhoria listened carefully, noting every small detail. A picture was beginning to form. Manisha was hiding something. Something she perhaps intended to reveal but never got the chance. The investigation took a sudden turn when officers combed through security footage from the streets around the Vardaan home. Most cameras showed nothing unusual, but one grainy frame from a shop near the market stood out. It captured a white SUV slowing near the road at the exact time Manisha was last seen. The vehicle lingered for several minutes before disappearing into the distance. That SUV became the first real lead in the case. Registration records revealed that the vehicle belonged to a local businessman named Sumer Malik. He was a wealthy man with influence, a figure both respected and feared in Bhiwani. Rumors about him stretched far, from illegal land grabbing to violent disputes, but his power had always kept him untouched by law. The discovery of his name sent a ripple through the investigation team. If Malik was involved, the case would not only be dangerous but politically sensitive as well. When police visited his residence, Malik greeted them with a practiced calmness. He denied any knowledge of Manisha and claimed his vehicle had been driven by employees that evening. His words carried confidence, but his eyes betrayed flickers of unease. To someone like Inspector Bhoria, such signs were impossible to ignore. Still, without evidence, Malik could not be directly implicated. Meanwhile, public interest in the case grew. Local newspapers began covering the story, framing Manisha's disappearance as a mystery that held the entire town hostage. Every corner of Bhiwani buzzed with speculation. Some accused Raghav, others whispered about Malik, while a few believed Manisha might have staged her own disappearance. The uncertainty left the community restless, and the police under immense pressure to deliver answers. Forensic analysis of Manisha's phone records finally deepened the plot. Late-night calls linked her number to Malik's personal phone. Hours of conversation had taken place between them in the weeks before her disappearance. To the outside world, this appeared as the beginnings of a secret affair. The mere possibility of it sent shockwaves through the town, staining Manisha's image in gossip. But Divya pushed back against this narrative when questioned again. She insisted her friend had been working on something far more dangerous, collecting information that could expose Malik's fraudulent land dealings. The new lead created two competing possibilities. Either Manisha had indeed been involved personally with Malik and paid the price, or she had discovered something about him that made her a threat. In either case, Malik's shadow loomed heavily over her disappearance. Inspector Bhoria weighed his options carefully. He could not ignore Raghav, whose inconsistencies and personal ties remained troubling, but the discovery of Malik's involvement presented a far larger and riskier angle. Between a husband with shaky alibis and a powerful businessman with everything to lose, the truth sat precariously hidden. The case was no longer just about a missing woman. It was about untangling a web of deceit, power, and betrayal. And as suspicion spread, every passing hour made the truth harder to reach. The deeper Inspector Kunal Bhoria dug, the more unsettling the picture became. Phone records showed that Manisha and Sumer Malik had spoken almost every night for the past month. The duration of the calls ranged from 10 minutes to nearly an hour. On the surface, the evidence hinted at a possible affair, something that would have explained the sudden interest Malik seemed to have in her. Yet, to someone like Bhoria, quick conclusions were dangerous. Motives in crimes like these often lay far beyond the obvious. He pressed further, determined to uncover what truly bound Manisha and Malik. Divya Rathore provided the missing piece that reshaped the case entirely. She explained that Manisha had been quietly gathering documents, maps and notes about Malik's land dealing. He had a reputation for grabbing agricultural plots, intimidating farmers into signing away their rights, and then selling the land for enormous profit. Manisha, with her education in commerce and her sharp investigative nature, had been documenting these irregularities. She believed she could hand over her findings to a journalist or the authorities. Divya said her friend wanted to protect those being exploited, but she also feared the consequences. Manisha once admitted to her that if Malik ever discovered what she was doing, her safety would be in grave danger. This revelation reframed the phone records. The calls were no longer about romance. They were likely about confrontation. Manisha may have been threatening Malik with exposure, or perhaps she was pretending to be closer to him in order to extract information. Either way, it put her directly in the path of a man who had much to lose. With this knowledge, Inspector Bhoria sought permission to search Malik's farmhouse on the outskirts of Bhiwani. The property was sprawling, hidden behind tall walls, and known to host his late-night gathering. During the search, the team discovered something that made their blood run cold. In one corner of the yard, they found traces of burnt fabric, remnants of clothing. Forensic experts later confirmed that the material contained faint traces of female perfume. Beside the ash pile lay a wristwatch, delicate in design, broken at the strap. It was identified by Divya as belonging to Manisha. The discovery raised alarms but also created new complications. While these items strongly indicated that Manisha had been at the farmhouse, they were not enough to directly accuse Malik of a crime. He brushed off the findings, claiming that the watch had been planted, and the burnt fabric was merely trash from an old party. His wealth and influence bought him lawyers who argued every angle, making it difficult for the police to hold him without irrefutable evidence. Despite Malik's denials, the atmosphere in Bhiwani began to shift. The townspeople, who once admired his success, started to whisper more openly about his corrupt dealings. The case gave voice to years of silent resentment against his arrogance and misuse of power. Yet the fear of his retaliation kept many from stepping forward with what they knew. Meanwhile, Raghav's role grew more suspicious by the day. On the surface, he presented himself as a grieving husband desperate for answers, but investigators noticed how often he deflected questions about his wife's personal activity. When asked about her late-night phone calls, he claimed ignorance, saying he had been too busy with work to notice. His calmness seemed unnatural for someone whose spouse had vanished under mysterious circumstances. For Bhoria, it was becoming clear that Raghav was either hiding something, or knew more than he admitted. The two threads of suspicion, the powerful businessman and the husband, with secrets, now wove together into a dangerous puzzle. If Manisha had been exposing Malik, it meant she had uncovered sensitive information. But how much had she told Raghav? Could her own husband have played a role in silencing her to protect himself or their family name? The farmhouse discoveries were filed, and pressure on the police increased. Media outlets began to circle the story, broadcasting speculation and fueling public anger. Every headline reminded the people of Bhiwani that a young woman had vanished, possibly killed, for daring to confront corruption. Yet amid all the noise, the truth remained buried. For Inspector Bhoria, the case was like chasing shadows in a maze of lies. Each lead seemed to pull him toward Malik, but the inconsistencies in Raghav's story refused to be ignored. Manisha's disappearance was no longer a simple case of a woman gone missing. It had become a battle against power, secrecy, and betrayal. Somewhere within this tangled web lay the real truth, waiting to be uncovered. The case appeared to be at a deadlock until an unexpected voice emerged from the silence. Aarti Dabas, a neighbor who had lived just 2 houses away from the Vardaan residence, finally stepped forward after weeks of uncertainty. She was a quiet woman who rarely spoke to anyone beyond polite greetings, but the tension in the town and the restless murmurs of her conscience pushed her to break her silence. When she visited the police station,
She carried a secret that could change everything. Aarti revealed that on the very night Manisha vanished, she had seen something strange from her balcony. Around the time Manisha was last seen, a white SUV had been parked not far from her house. Two men stood near the vehicle, one of them tall and broad-shouldered, the other slimmer. From her position, Aarti saw them struggling with a figure who appeared to be resisting. The person was forced into the back of the SUV before it sped away. Fear had kept her from coming forward earlier, but her conscience no longer allowed her to remain silent. Her statement electrified the investigation. It directly linked Manisha's disappearance to the white SUV already identified as belonging to Sumer Malik. Now there was not only circumstantial evidence, but also an eyewitness account placing her near Malik's vehicle. The police immediately expanded their search of the farmhouse and its surrounding property, determined to find physical proof that could support Aarti's words. The second search revealed new clues that had been overlooked before. In a corner of the farmhouse yard, investigators noticed freshly dug earth, a patch that appeared different from the rest of the soil. The team brought in forensic experts, who carefully unearthed the buried under the soil were several items: a phone with its screen smashed, fragments of clothing, and a small notebook. The phone was later confirmed to be Manisha's, identified by serial numbers and backed up date. The notebook, damp and torn, contained scribbled notes about land plots, names of farmers, and unusual financial figures, all connected to Malik's dealings. This discovery changed the tone of the investigation completely. It became clear that Manisha had been working against Malik, and had collected damaging information that could expose him. The buried belongings suggested an attempt to erase evidence, but not carefully enough. The farmhouse was no longer just a place of suspicion. It became the heart of the crime scene. News of these findings spread rapidly, igniting outrage across Bhiwani. Crowds gathered outside the police station demanding justice. Posters of Manisha transformed from missing person appeals into symbols of resistance against corruption and power. The people who had once been silent in fear now whispered openly about Malik's cruelty and his long history of intimidating those who opposed him. Yet the most startling development was Malik's sudden disappearance. Before police could formally charge him, he fled Bhiwani, leaving behind his mansion and businesses under the care of associates. His vanishing act made the townspeople certain of his guilt, but questions still lingered. Was Malik acting alone, or had someone else close to Manisha also played a role? The suspicion around Raghav grew heavier. Investigators noticed his reactions to the farmhouse discoveries were oddly restrained. While most would expect shock or devastation at finding a spouse's belongings buried in such a place, Raghav remained composed, sometimes even defensive. He dismissed the idea that Manisha had been gathering evidence, insisting she was too simple for such work. These dismissals only deepened Inspector Bhoria's suspicion that Raghav knew more than he revealed. Meanwhile, Divya Rathore continued to cooperate with investigators, providing insight into Manisha's thoughts and feelings. She confirmed that the notebook looked similar to the one Manisha carried daily, which she used to record details about everything from groceries to sensitive notes. This connection cemented the theory that Manisha had indeed documented critical evidence against Malik. Divya's testimony, paired with Aarti's eyewitness account, and the items recovered from the farmhouse, created a strong narrative pointing toward foul play. The disappearance of Malik, however, complicated matters. Without him in custody, the case lacked a central figure to blame directly. The police issued alerts across state borders, but tracking someone with his resources was no simple task. Rumors placed him in Delhi. Others claimed he had gone as far as Rajasthan. Each unverified sighting only added layers of uncertainty. The town of Bhiwani grew restless, living in the tension between grief and anger. People feared Malik's men still operated in the shadows, ensuring no one dared to testify further. Yet the courage of Aarti and Divya inspired others to begin sharing bits of information, though cautious. Inspector Bhoria now had to piece together a puzzle that stretched beyond a single crime. It was becoming a story of corruption, betrayal, and the silencing of those who stood against powerful men. The case, once centered on the mystery of a missing woman, was now pulling open the rotten core of the town's hidden truth. Every day revealed another layer of darkness, and though Malik had fled, his shadow loomed large. For the first time, though, there was hope that the silence surrounding Manisha's disappearance was beginning to break. Several weeks after Malik's escape, a discovery shook the case beyond all expectation. A farmer working near a dried-out canal bed on the outskirts of Bhiwani noticed a patch of disturbed earth. Curious, he began to dig, and what he unearthed left him terrified. Human remains lay buried beneath the soil, wrapped in fragments of cloth. Authorities were alerted immediately, and forensic experts confirmed the remains belonged to Manisha Vardaan. The confirmation ended weeks of uncertainty, but it also ignited fresh anger across the town. For the people of Bhiwani, it was no longer just a disappearance, it was murder. The forensic team determined that Manisha had been strangled before her body was transported to the site and buried hastily. Marks on the bones suggested a violent struggle, evidence that she had resisted until her final breath. These findings silenced those who still believed she might have left on her own. Manisha had been silenced deliberately, and the killer had gone to lengths to erase her presence. Yet with the body recovered, investigators now had stronger grounds to pursue justice. Inspector Kunal Bhoria and his team turned to the evidence recovered from the farmhouse, particularly the phone. Although the device was badly damaged, forensic experts managed to retrieve fragments of data. Hidden within the phone were draft messages, audio recordings, and notes that Manisha had been compiling in her final weeks. They were chilling in their clarity. She had detailed the fraudulent land deals, listed the names of farmers coerced into signing documents, and even hinted that her own husband, Raghav, was involved in secret meetings with Malik. The digital trail provided a motive far deeper than jealousy or personal conflict. It pointed to conspiracy. The revelation was shocking. Raghav, who had projected the image of a distressed husband, was suddenly painted as someone with dangerous secrets. Investigators re-examined his financial records and found unusual deposits that linked directly to Malik's company. When confronted with the evidence, Raghav faltered. His calm exterior cracked, replaced by nervousness he could no longer control. Slowly, the truth unfolded. He had been a silent partner in Malik's fraudulent operation. Manisha, determined to expose the illegal dealings, had unknowingly threatened her own husband's livelihood. The investigators pieced together the grim timeline. Manisha's determination to reveal Malik's crimes made her a liability to both men. Fearing exposure, Malik and Raghav conspired together. The plan was brutal, yet simple: eliminate her before she could go public. Malik's men had executed the abduction, while Raghav provided information about her routine. The farmhouse became the site where her belongings were destroyed, and the canal bed became her final resting place. Public outrage grew louder as these details came to light. The idea that Raghav, the man who was supposed to protect her, had betrayed her for greed, made the crime feel even more monstrous. Malik, meanwhile, remained on the run, his wealth allowing him to slip through networks of influence. But the net was tightening. Police traced his movements to Rajasthan, where he had been hiding under a false identity. After a tense manhunt, he was captured and brought back to Haryana under heavy security. The trial that followed became one of the most closely watched in the region. Witnesses like Aarti and Divya provided powerful testimonies. Forensic evidence, digital records, and the recovered belongings formed an unshakable chain of proof. The courtroom atmosphere was tense, but as the details of the conspiracy were laid bare, the image of Malik as an untouchable businessman crumbled. Raghav too faced the consequences of his betrayal. Both men were convicted, their sentences serving as a grim reminder of how greed and power could consume lives. For the people of Bhiwani, the conclusion of the case was bittersweet. Justice had been served, but at the cost of a life that had fought for truth. Manisha's courage became a symbol, her story retold as one of bravery against corruption. Murals of her face appeared across town, painted by young activists determined not to let her memory fade. She was remembered not only as a victim, but as a fighter whose determination exposed the rot within powerful circles. The tragedy of Manisha Vardaan revealed a painful truth. Those closest to us could sometimes be the ones who plotted in silence. Her story became a reminder that even when the truth is buried deep, it cannot remain hidden forever. In the end, her voice spoke louder through the evidence she left behind, and though her life was taken, her legacy endured as a warning and an inspiration for all who dared to confront corruption.